Okay, so have you ever felt like there's this wellspring of creativity inside you,
Mm-hmm.
but you just can't seem to tap into it?
Yeah,
Like you've got all these dreams and ideas, but fear is like this big giant stop sign.
absolutely.
Well, get ready because today we're diving deep into Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic
Oh, I love that book.
to unlock that magic within. And I'll tell you, this is not your average self-help pep talk.
No, not at all. In fact, Gilbert's book, it's not really like a how-to guide to being more creative. It's really more about like shifting your entire perspective on what creativity even is.
And she starts off with this fascinating story about a poet named Jack Gilbert.
Okay.
Now, not related to Elizabeth,
Right.
but his story had such a profound impact on her.
I can see why.
So picture this. Jack Gilbert wins the Yale Younger Poets Prize, gets nominated for a Fate Pulitzer, even lands a photo shoot for Vogue.
Wow.
But instead of riding that wave of success, he chooses a life of solitude, practically living in poverty.
Really?
Yeah, fame and fortune were just not his thing. He was all about the work itself.
That's pretty powerful.
Mm.
Like his story makes you think about what really matters when it comes to creative expression. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most fulfilling kind of creative work comes from just the act of creating itself, not chasing external validation.
And Gilbert shares this really thought-provoking anecdote about Jack asking one of his students,
Okay.
"Do you have the courage to bring forth this work? The treasures that are hidden inside you are hoping you will say yes."
Wow.
I mean, talk about a wake-up call, right?
It's like this universal fear that I think everyone faces.
Yeah.
We all have those hidden treasures, those ideas and passions, but fear can be so crippling.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there. And Gilbert gets real about those fears, like she's reading my diary.
What do you mean?
She lists a whole bunch of them. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough.
Yeah, we've all been there.
It's like she's been spying on my inner monologue.
But you know what I think what's so refreshing about Gilbert's approach is that she doesn't sugarcoat it. She doesn't tell you to just get over it.
Yeah.
She recognizes that fear is a natural part of the human experience. It's as common as, she says, a cheap plastic toy.
Or even better, she calls it a dumb inner tadpole.
Yes. I love that analogy.
So good. It's like this little tadpole in your brain trying to protect you, but mostly just holding you back.
Exactly. And you know what? When you realize that everyone's dealing with their own inner tadpole, it makes you feel less alone.
Oh, totally.
It's not this big scary monster only you have to face.
Right.
It's something we all have in common.
So instead of letting fear call the shots, Gilbert talks about embracing what she calls creative living.
I like that.
And it's all about choosing curiosity over fear, even if it seems a little scary.
Sometimes you have to take that leap of faith, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
she gives this great example in the book about her friend Susan, who decided to take up figure skating at 40.
Wow. Good for her.
Not because she wanted to go pro or anything, but simply because it brought her joy.
It's about that aliveness, right?
It's about making your life more vibrant just for the experience of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not about being the best or achieving some big goal. Just about saying yes to the things that light you up.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what's that thing you've always wanted to try, but fear has been holding you back? That's your inner tadpole talking.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to chill out and see where your curiosity leads.
So we talked about facing down those fears, right? Those inner tadpoles that try to keep us small.
Right. Less fear, more magic.
Exactly. But how do we actually, access that magic? Where does it come from?
Okay, so get this. Gilbert has some pretty out there ideas about this, and it all centers around how she views ideas themselves.
Okay. How so?
So she tells the story about how this idea for a novel hit her. And this wasn't just like a light bulb moment. This was like a full-on visceral experience.
Wow.
She compares it to falling in love, like getting alarming news, even looking over a precipice.
Intense.
Right. And she really believes that ideas are more than just thoughts we come up with.
Oh.
She thinks they're like living entities out there in the world searching for the right person to bring them to life.
So they're looking for us.
It's kind of a wild concept, right?
It is.
But have you ever had an idea that just popped into your head fully formed, like it was just waiting for you?
Oh, yeah, totally. And it's like, where did that come from?
And that's what Gilbert's getting at. She thinks these ideas are constantly floating around like little sparks of energy looking for someone who's open and ready.
But we're not always great at recognizing those sparks, are we?
Totally. We get caught up in our routines and to-do lists and anxieties and miss those subtle whispers of inspiration. And she actually talks about how she had to put her Amazon novel on hold because life happened.
Oh, no, what happened?
Her partner was detained in the U.S., and she felt like she had to write committed instead.
Wow. Yeah, I could see how that would derail things.
And it's a good reminder that sometimes life throws you curveballs, and even the most amazing ideas get put on hold.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. You think this story ends with her regretting that she never wrote that novel, but that's not what happens at all.
Really?
Okay, so years later, she meets Anne Patchett.
Oh, wow, I love her.
And guess what? Anne ends up writing a novel set in the Amazon with like a surprisingly similar plot to the one Gilbert had envisioned.
You're kidding? That's wild.
I know, right? And for Gilbert, this wasn't just a coincidence. It was like confirmation that ideas have a life of their own.
So it found its way to Anne.
Exactly. It's like the universe was like, okay, not now, but I got this.
I love that. And I think there's something really freeing about that idea.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Like, even if an idea doesn't work out right now, it might circle back, or it might find its way to someone else who can bring it to life in a way you never could have imagined.
It takes the pressure off a little bit.
It does.
Yeah.
We just have to stay open, stay curious, and trust that those sparks of inspiration will find us.
So we've faced our fears. We've tapped into the magic of ideas, but how do we actually like bridge that gap and bring those ideas to life?
That's the real work, right? It's easy to get stuck in our heads feeling like we need someone's permission to actually create.
Yeah, totally. Like, who am I to write a book or start a business or whatever it is?
Exactly. But Gilbert has this really empowering message about permission.
What's back?
It's not about waiting for someone to give you a gold star or tell you it's okay to pursue your passions. You already have permission.
It's like we're holding ourselves back.
In a way, yeah. She actually talks about this idea of creative entitlement.
Entitlement. That sounds a little iffy. Isn't that like a bad word these days?
Yeah, it can be, but she's reclaiming it here. She's not talking about feeling entitled to special treatment or anything like that, but rather this deep-seated belief that you have an inherent right to create simply because you exist.
I like that. So it's like we don't need a permission slip to explore our own creativity.
Precisely.
And it's interesting because she actually connects this idea of permission back to her own upbringing.
How so?
So her parents were like these incredibly resourceful DIY kind of people.
Really? What'd they do?
Well, her dad was an engineer, but then decided to become a farmer and beekeeper.
Wow, that's quite a change.
Yeah, and her mom was like a master of everything, building, sewing, fixing, you name it, she could do it.
Sounds like a pretty creative household.
They were all about making things happen, and they weren't doing it for recognition or awards. They just did it because it brought them joy and it felt right.
And that's the energy Gilbert wants us to tap into.
Right.
Right? That sense of, I'm just going to do this because it lights me up.
Absolutely. So what's that one thing you've been putting off, that creative itch you've been dying to scratch? Maybe it's time to stop waiting for permission and just go for it.
You know it. And here's a little secret weapon from Gilbert. Embrace disciplined half-assedness.
Did you just say disciplined half-assedness?
I did. It sounds funny, but it's actually brilliant. It's the antidote to perfectionism, which, let's be honest, is the ultimate creativity killer.
Ugh, tell me about it. Perfectionism is that voice in your head that's never satisfied, always saying, it's not good enough.
And Gilbert's point is, who cares if it's not perfect? What matters is that you're creating.
So true. It's about the process, not just the end result.
Exactly. She actually tells this great story about a middle-aged man who goes to Richard Ford, the writer, for advice. This guy has been writing his whole life, but never published anything.
Oh, wow.
And you know what Ford tells him? Quit.
Quit? Seriously, that seems kind of harsh.
It does, but his point was that if this man truly had a passion for writing, it would call him back, even if he tried to walk away.
So you can't escape your true calling.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to silence that inner critic, the voice of perfectionism, is to just start creating, even if it's messy, even if it's half-assed.
Love that. So we faced our fears, we've tapped into the magic of ideas, given ourselves permission to create. What's the final piece of this puzzle?
Trust in yourself, trust in the process, and maybe even a little trust in the universe.
Gilbert calls it fierce trust, right?
Exactly. It's not about being naive, it's about acknowledging the uncertainty, the inevitable bumps in the road, and choosing to move forward anyway.
It's about having faith in the journey.
I love that. You know, she tells this great story about her friend, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a botanist and writer. She asks her students two questions. Do you love nature? And do you believe nature loves you back?
Those are interesting questions. What do they have to do with creativity?
It's about our relationship with our work. You know, do you love writing, painting, dancing, whatever your creative outlet is? And more importantly, do you believe it loves you back?
I never thought about it like that.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that creativity has to be a struggle, that if it's not painful, it's not real art.
Yeah, we put so much pressure on ourselves.
And Gilbert wants to dismantle that idea.
Ah.
She shares this story about a young novelist, Katie Arnold Ratliff, who was told that if she wasn't emotionally uncomfortable while writing, her work was worthless.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible. What kind of advice is that?
Right. It's so unnecessary. Gilbert believes that creativity can and should be joyful, playful, even magical.
And that's where her idea of trickster trust comes in.
Yes. It's about approaching your craft with a sense of adventure, a willingness to embrace those unexpected twists and turns.
Because sometimes those detours lead to the most amazing discoveries.
Exactly. Speaking of detours, Gilbert shares this wonderful anecdote about Balinese dancers.
Oh, I love that story. What happens?
So when Western tourists wanted to see their traditional temple dances, the dancers, instead of compromising their sacred rituals, they created new playful dances just for the resorts.
Wow, so they found a way to honor their traditions while still embracing this new form of creative expression.
Exactly. And that's what I think Gilbert wants us to take away from. Big Beijing doesn't have to fit into a neat little box. It can be sacred and playful, deeply meaningful and utterly meaningless all at the same time.
It's about embracing the paradoxes.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into big magic, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away?
Well, I think for me, it's that the magic is real, it's within all of us, and it's just waiting for us to say yes.
Beautifully said. And you know what? I think we all have a little bit of that disciplined half-assedness in us.
I think you're right.
So let's embrace it. Tap into those sparks of inspiration and see what we can create.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those creative fires burning.